It begins with a silence more terrifying than war. Airports empty, borders sealed, millions of young men vanish into the shadows of their own country. What kind of nation locks itself inside its own cage? From Moscow to Vladivostok, a quiet panic spreads. Families whisper of sons taken from train stations, of police checkpoints appearing overnight. President Vladimir Putin, once obsessed with expansion abroad, now fights a war at home against his own people. The Kremlin calls it security. Russians call it fear. According to reports from Reuters and BBC, the Kremlin's new restrictions effectively trap nearly 2 million draft-age men inside Russia. Officially, the policy targets unauthorized travel to NATO countries. Unofficially, it is a lockdown, a bid to stop a new wave of desertions. The same regime that once accused the West of isolating Russia has now built an iron curtain of its own. The event marks a grim turn. A nation that once prided itself on resilience is collapsing under the weight of its own paranoia. Moscow's manpower crisis, worsened by staggering battlefield losses in Ukraine, has forced the Kremlin into desperation. Defense News confirms Russian forces have lost nearly 1% of their male population, under 60, a toll unseen since World War II. Strategically, Putin's choice is clear control or collapse. Each man who escapes represents a missing soldier, a broken cog in his war machine. So the state acts restricting movement, expanding surveillance, criminalizing dissent. What began as a special operation abroad has become a massive internal mobilization. Globally, parallels emerge as Iran tightens its grip on dissent amid its shadow war with Israel, and China expands domestic surveillance under the guise of stability. Russia's dissent fits a pattern of regimes trading freedom for the illusion of strength. Yet in Ukraine, that illusion crumbles under Western-supplied drones and long-range missiles, proving that control does not equal power. The human impact is devastating. Mothers fear every knock on the door. Students cancel foreign visas. A generation is being raised not for innovation or industry, but for war. Even the wealthy, once immune to state pressure, now find escape routes closing. The country that claims to protect traditional values now destroys the very families it vows to defend. So the question remains, when a government builds walls to keep its citizens from leaving, who is the real enemy, NATO or the fear of its own people? It began in September 2022, the month Russia panicked. Putin's so-called partial mobilization was meant to save his war. Instead, it exposed the collapse of his empire from within. Overnight, the illusion of control evaporated. Airports flooded, borders jammed. 1 million men fled in a single week. From Reuters to DW footage showed fathers saying goodbye at train stations, unsure if they would ever see their sons again. The Kremlin's promise of a quick victory died in those moments. What followed was chaos, draft offices burned, police, beaten protesters dragged through the streets of Dagestan and Moscow. For the first time in decades, ordinary Russians openly defied their ruler. The mobilization triggered more than rebellion. It bled the nation's future. Skilled engineers, coders, and factory specialists, the backbone of Russia's modern economy, vanished overnight. The Guardian reported a 12% decline in IT professionals, and the central bank warned that the workforce collapse could cripple national output for years. Yet Putin pressed on sacrificing talent for obedience. Strategically, the consequences were catastrophic. By declaring mobilization, the Kremlin confirmed what it denied for months: the war was not under control. The myth of Russian invincibility, carefully built since Crimea, cracked wide open. The president's image as the architect of a stable, powerful state was replaced by the face of a desperate man willing to burn his own house to win abroad. Across the globe, the echoes were unmistakable. Israel's current mobilization of reservists against Iranian proxy threats, Ukraine's ongoing defense drafts, and China's push for national readiness under Xi Jinping all reveal the same dilemma. When nations prepare for endless conflict, they erode the very societies they claim to defend. Power devours its foundation. For ordinary Russians, life became a roulette of fear. A man could be taken from his factory floor, from his classroom, from his wedding. Some were promised safety in rear positions. Most were sent straight to the trenches. Al Jazeera documented cases where families were notified of deaths before any official confirmation bodies returned without names. By 2023, even regional leaders in Moscow and St. Petersburg began whispering resignation calls, a taboo in Putin's Russia. The old loyalty cracked under pressure. Still, he doubled down, promising patriotic unity while turning the army's failures into propaganda victories. The question now is not how long Russia can fight Ukraine, but how long it can fight itself. Each conscription wave fuels anger. Each exiled mind weakens the future. The mobilization that was meant to preserve the nation may have already destroyed its soul. When power depends on fear and loyalty depends on survival, how long before fear runs out? Money became the Kremlin's new weapon. When bullets failed to recruit, rubles took their place. Across Russia's vast provinces, from the frozen towns of Yakutia to the mining belts of the Urals, the government launched a brutal campaign: fight for your country, get rich overnight. It worked at first. Defense contracts promised soldiers up to 2 million rubles, enough to erase a lifetime of debt. Billboards glowed with patriotism and prosperity. Reuters documented how regional governors competed for enlistments, offering cars, apartments, even lifetime pensions. The message was clear: die for Putin and your family lives well. But by 2025, the illusion cracked. The war had dragged on far longer than expected, and the Kremlin's financial lifeline began to dry up. BBC News confirmed that oil refineries, nearly 38% of Russia's refining capacity, were destroyed by Ukrainian drone strikes. New US sanctions under President Trump's administration targeted Russian exports, crushing regional budgets. Suddenly, those golden bonuses vanished. In August, The Guardian revealed that the St. Petersburg Parliament canceled retroactively the very payments promised to active soldiers. Men fighting on the front lines discovered their contracts erased for budgetary adjustments. It was betrayal in its purest form. Families who had already lost sons now faced financial ruin. One widow told DW, "They took my husband's life and his last promise. They even took the number from his bank." Strategically, this exposed the Kremlin's deepest vulnerability: a war economy sustained by lies. Without money to buy loyalty, Putin turned once again to coercion. The social contract fight for fortune was replaced by fear. Regional commanders received quotas instead of incentives. What was once an army of volunteers turned into a machine of desperation. Globally, this shift mirrors how autocracies sustain endless wars. Iran funds its militias through oil deals. China enforces military expansion through nationalistic debt. Russia tried both and failed. As defense news analysts noted, Moscow is running out of both men and money. The human toll was staggering. Veterans returned home crippled and unpaid. Thousands of wounded soldiers filled hospitals with no prosthetics, no compensation, and no acknowledgement. Even loyal propagandists began to falter. A popular state TV anchor was caught on a hot mic whispering, "They're paying people to die, and now they don't even pay." The Kremlin's gamble turning patriotism into profit has backfired catastrophically. Russia's poor, once promised salvation through war, now face the same poverty and loss they tried to escape. The gold-painted dream of sacrifice has rusted into silence. And yet the war machine demands more bodies. So the question lingers: if money can no longer buy loyalty, will terror become the only currency left? When the rubles ran out, the laws changed. Putin's regime didn't announce a new mobilization, it rewrote reality instead. In a quiet session of the State Duma, legislators passed a bill that altered Russia's military code forever. No longer would there be spring and autumn draft cycles. Now the draft window never closes. Every day, every hour, every man of age becomes eligible. The system breathes like a predator, always watching, always waiting. Officially, the Kremlin framed it as efficiency. In truth, it was the legal foundation for permanent mobilization. Reuters and DW reported how the law blurred the distinction between voluntary service and forced conscription. A teenager can now voluntarily sign a contract after relentless pressure from military offices. Refusal invites harassment or worse, torture. This quiet legal shift signals a strategic evolution. Rather than declaring war a move that would expose weakness, Putin transformed mobilization into bureaucracy. There is no announcement, no panic, no visible uprising, only paperwork, signatures, and fear. BBC News confirmed reports that conscripts as young as 18 are being coerced to sign long-term service contracts, often without understanding the fine print. Once the ink dries, these volunteers are immediately deployed to the front under the guise of legality. Commanders now shout, "You signed, now fight." Those who refuse are labeled deserters, punishable by imprisonment or execution under wartime statutes. Strategically, it's genius in its cruelty. The Kremlin can deny mobilization while filling its ranks. Western intelligence calls it shadow conscription. According to Jane's Defense Weekly, up to 450,000 men have been funneled through this process since 2024. That's 500,000 soldiers without a single televised announcement. Globally, the playbook feels familiar. China's new People's Defense Law of 2024 expanded civilian duty clauses, mirroring Russia's stealth approach to permanent readiness. Iran's Revolutionary Guard recruits volunteers from universities in exchange for state privileges. In each case, consent is manufactured, obedience is engineered. For Russians, the consequences are suffocating. Human rights groups documented surveillance checkpoints at metro stations and workplaces, cross-referencing ID data to locate draft-eligible men. The Guardian described a Moscow nightclub raid where police detained over 100 patrons, most between 18 and 22, and escorted them directly to draft offices. This transformation is more than a mobilization. It is a conversion of citizenship into servitude. Every young man becomes both soldier and prisoner. The Kremlin no longer needs public rallies or patriotic speeches. Its laws now speak louder than its propaganda. So as the machinery of war grinds endlessly forward, one question emerges from the silence. When the state can summon you at any moment, do you still belong to your country, or does your country belong to you? The lockdown deepened not with tanks, but with cameras. In Moscow, St. Petersburg, and dozens of regional cities, a digital dragnet spread like wildfire. Facial recognition systems once sold as tools to catch criminals were repurposed to hunt young men dodging the draft. Metro turnstiles beeped red as hidden algorithms flagged missing conscripts. Police waited at exits with tablets in hand, scanning faces like barcodes. BBC and DW reported that the Kremlin's Safe City program now links more than 200,000 cameras to a national mobilization database. A system built for public safety has become an instrument of control. And it doesn't stop there. Under Putin's new travel bans, any citizen of fighting age is prohibited from visiting NATO countries. Officially, it's about protecting national secrets. In truth, it's about trapping manpower. The Guardian quoted one Muscovite: "They say NATO is the enemy, but I can't even go to Finland for my brother's wedding. Who's really afraid of whom?" Strategically, this shift completes the metamorphosis. Russia is no longer just a state, it is a fortress under siege by its own leader. The Kremlin knows it cannot win by outgunning NATO, so it tightens its grip internally. Economists from Reuters now describe Russia's economy as a closed circuit, a system feeding off itself until nothing remains. Globally, the pattern resonates. In Tehran, the morality police enforce political obedience as Iran prepares for confrontation with Israel. In Beijing, social credit systems penalize dissent to maintain control, amid rising tension with the United States. Each regime uses surveillance as a weapon trading transparency for total power. For Russians, this is the new normal. Nightclubs are raided, gyms are surrounded, restaurants become traps. Human rights observers reported that some men are taken from their homes after midnight without notice, without trial. Mothers fear answering the door. A single ping from a government app can destroy a family. Even students abroad are affected. New restrictions prevent them from renewing passports, effectively stranding thousands outside Russia's borders, unable to return or escape. One Russian journalist told Al Jazeera, "It's like the country is shrinking around us one law at a time." The psychological toll is immeasurable. Fear replaces patriotism. Young Russians whisper that the only way to survive is invisibility, no social media, no travel, no questions. The Kremlin has built not just a prison, but a mindset obedience as safety. In an age where wars are fought with drones and data, Russia's newest battlefield is digital, and its target is its own youth. How long can a nation fight ghosts abroad while its own citizens disappear in plain sight? In the ruins of Pokrovsk, the ground shakes from Russian artillery. Smoke curls through shattered windows as teenage soldiers some barely out of school stumble through the wreckage. Their commanders scream orders. Their faces are hollow. Many don't even know why they're there. Reuters reports that over 120,000 Russians have died in this region alone, yet the Kremlin hails it as progress. Putin's forces advance a few kilometers and call it liberation. Behind each step forward lies a graveyard of sons who never volunteered, never understood the war they were sent to fight. At home, anger simmers. Mothers post videos begging for news of their children. Widows gather in silence outside local recruitment centers. Even the loyal are beginning to question what they're defending. "It's not Ukraine we're losing," said one woman to BBC News. "It's ourselves." Strategically, Putin's great lockdown has become a war of attrition, not just against Kyiv, but against Russia's own population. Every measure, travel bans, secret mobilizations, unpaid bonuses, reveals a regime consuming its people to feed its ambitions. Analysts at Jane's Defense Weekly describe it as a circular collapse. Russia's quest for control, accelerating the very instability it fears. Meanwhile abroad, the consequences ripple. As the US-China rivalry sharpens under President Trump's second term, Washington's defense hawks point to Moscow's decay as proof of deterrence working. This is what unchecked autocracy becomes, one Pentagon official told Defense News. Yet the same tightening of control is visible elsewhere. Beijing's new draft laws, Iran's military crackdowns, and Israel's escalations in the north. The global line between defense and domination grows thinner by the day. Within Russia, the human cost is no longer hidden. Hospitals overflow with amputees. Deserters vanish into forests or cross borders at night. Economists warn of a lost generation of men, a demographic collapse that could haunt the country for decades. DW estimates that Russia's workforce will shrink by 15% within 5 years. That's not victory, that's extinction by policy. And yet, Putin persists. His government orders commanders to gain ground at any cost. Teenagers are thrown into firestorms fighting for villages no one will remember. Propaganda calls them heroes. Reality calls them hostages. History has seen this before empires that imprison themselves in pursuit of greatness. But never has the cage been so digital, so efficient, so complete. The Iron Curtain has returned not to divide Europe, but to divide Russians from their own freedom. So as the world watches Russia's walls close tighter, one question remains. If a leader must lock down his nation to preserve his power, how long before that nation locks him in too? Putin's Great Russian Lockdown marks the most profound internal crisis of his rule. Facing a collapsing war effort and severe manpower shortages, the Kremlin has sealed Russia's borders, expanded surveillance, and forced millions of young men into indefinite conscription. What began as an invasion of Ukraine has transformed into a quiet war against the Russian population itself. Economic collapse, unpaid soldiers, and vanishing freedoms have shattered the illusion of stability. Each policy, from secret mobilizations to travel bans, reveals a government more afraid of its citizens than its enemies. Analysts warn that this internal repression may soon outweigh Russia's external ambitions, turning the nation into a hollowed-out fortress. Across the globe, parallels in Iran, China, and Israel show the same pattern: fear replacing freedom in the name of security. The question for history and for the Russian people is whether the cage Putin built to control them will one day close around him.